Okay, you have to remember, Jeremy really did convince the whole world about this. So we thought we should give him a chance to at least convince this group. And here he is. It's Jeremy Bentham in person from the beyond.
You have strong candles in those little starlight balls. Every so many decades, I'm allowed out of the British Museum, and it's nice to be back and having some air in my lungs again. It's been an interesting conversation to hear you all talking about usury and how we're going to get along in this life. Now, how are we going to think about usury? Let's think. We've heard wonderful things about distribution and sharing and interest and profit and good concepts. And usury is bad. Oh, usury is very bad. Well, let's think about this. Now, what is usury? I'm considering usury to be a greater interest than is usual. We can call that the moral definition, perhaps. Or we can maybe say it's greater interest than what is legally allowed or politically. We can call that the political definition. Either case, what does it come from? It's based on custom. It's custom we have in history. You know, what is the custom? What is the custom for interest rates? Interest rates. Think of your interest rates. You can go to different cities and find different interest rates. What is the interest rate on this possibility or that possibility for return? And if we can call it a fee, or if we could call it a percentage, it's what type of chances are there to make a return. If you have seed corn, and how do you want to put that seed corn into your ground? Do you want to put it into the ground as a share, or do you want to put it in where you might make more money, where you might make more of the profit or more of the corn? If you're putting it in, you're putting it into, you might want more profit. You know, to talk about interest is to talk about what's basic in human nature. We're talking about greed. We're talking about desire. We're talking about getting something that you can share with others, your children or others. So let's look at interest for a moment. If you're a farmer putting in a crop, and if I can borrow that money rather than give away some of it, I might make more money. Therefore, you want to take a risk. And I can assume you're of sound mind and a reasonable person, and you can make your choices. People can make their choices. If you make the choice you want more, then you have to bear the consequences if there is a failure. And you may owe something. Maybe it's a percent of your land at that time. It's taking a bigger chance. When we give something to somebody else, we have to look at what are their means to repay it, and what is reasonable for what is that money being used. If you're taking a chance, and you're going to a chance at things at a bigger return, or it's more risky, naturally you want, and if you just want the money, it's naturally to ask for a higher interest rate. And let's look at this idea of compound interest for a moment. Say you have reasonable character in mind, and you have a schedule for repayment. You can make that reschedule go as fast or as slow as you want. Reasonable men can come to agreement on these things. If you have your reschedule payment every week or every year or every day, so be it. just to be aware of what's in the contract, and what do men agree with. So if it's in the contract and you're late, you've lost the use of that money. It's normal, or it's right, it's common sense that it could be used, it's a loss of money to the creditor, that he could use it or she could use it somewhere else. We have a funny place. We have a place for shares, and we have a place for bonds, and it's a use of money, and it's how we're gonna go forward. So, and sometimes in usury, what about that poor fellow over there? And I heard some conversation about French law or Roman law. Yes, you can have what's called an edict, and that is, if somebody is not of sound mind, or they may make a big mistake, maybe we have to put some regulation around that individual. But if they can make a sound mind and make good judgment, let them be. If they're, going on and they want and they like to spend and they have it, you have to still make the judgments. If they have it to spend and to waste, they can make judgments to do that. You have to be careful, does the person's security, is that good? Is there a reasonable prospect of return? And you can base the interest rate on that. If it's money they desire, and they're not after this idea of going after a share, but we can talk about that too. And this idea of compound, so if it's late, it's a loss of money, and we have a right to use that money in different ways. If you own your house, and the house over time, it goes up in value, do we hurt you for that, or do we make a law against it? Those idiot legislators, they're just making problems. If we're reasonable people, we can make these conversations. You can give an interest rate, or I can accept it, and it can go back and forth. I'll hold off my other comments for a moment, and let maybe some questions come to these gentlemen or myself. Thank you.
Jeremy, I appreciate your theoretical argument.
He meant questions from the board first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
I appreciate your giving me priority here. There's a question, a very urgent question I would like to ask you. How did you get here, and how did you get here looking so young?
I came up in a carriage along Lakeshore Drive, a beautiful lake you have. Everything's changed. It's very beautiful. I think you've done very well.
You did challenge our panel here, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, here, I
And
think
all others.
John and I wants to take up the challenge.
Professor Bentham, one, you are looking very well for somebody, 300 years old. So that's very interesting in itself. But the justification of interest as a matter of risk is certainly a plausible justification. But one wonders if this justification withstands the fact that you seem to be transferring the risk to the borrower. Now, I think when there is great risk, the lender should be compensated for great risk. However, if you're just transferring the risk to the borrower so that if the enterprise fails, then you seize his field, who has the risk? Who should be compensated here? Buyer or seller? Borrower or lender?
Again, men of sound mind are free to choose. And if you're going to make a proposition to me, and you want me to be a part of your venture, by all means. For an example, I've been writing this little book in defense of usury. I've been in Russia, and it's a beautiful place in Russia. And Vitrus Bering recently has gone out to the Bering Sea, gave that place his name, and they've been finding sea otters out there. And man, the Chinese are willing to pay a good price, we hear, for those sea otters. So we go after those sea otters. And people who go into the boats and the crew and the captain, they all have shares, much like we talk about. And they make their investments, and that's good. And they collect shares of the profit, like in the example you gave. Sometimes people want to go out there and they want to try to make more. They want to get further. They're willing to take greater risk and perhaps 2 to 3 times, for example, and then I believe it should be 2 to 3 times the interest rate, the common interest rate for the time that you can put money forward, and you take that chance. If you want to go with that money and you want to pay an interest on it, that's a choice. A choice can be towards a share too, and sharing it. But it depends with, if people are sound mind, they need to think about these things.
Mr. Bentham, we just had a situation arise here in the United States where people got all excited because the prices of houses were going up and up and up, and it seemed like it would never end. And they were so enthralled by this situation that they were getting second mortgages on their home, and they were putting the value of their houses at great risk because they thought it was quite reasonable to think that the prices of house would always continue to go up, because apparently they thought that was always the case. And then the banks thought, and they were also caught up on this too, and they said, well, we think this is such a great situation, we won't question your ability to pay back because your house is just going to increase in value. And then these banks, and they were all apparently of sound mind too, they took these mortgages and bundled them together, and they sold new forms of money makers to people, money making to others who wanted to buy those bundled mortgages, which they thought were only going to increase in value. But then something happened, and the prices of the houses started going down, and all of these loans went bad. Were all these people just crazy? Is that the way out? And if not, what do we do?
There's 2 people that suffer there. One is the person who buys the mortgage, and then the bank who is lost with it. The bank has made a gamble to go with that mortgage with the individual, and depending on the terms of what's written in the contract, the bank may have to suffer too. There was an earlier gentleman here who talked about New York, something about, if we can throw out the term, he may have used it or not, it was called the law of fraudulent conveyance. If you know the person cannot pay, maybe there should be a consequence. Maybe you can write a law like that. So if the bank knowingly does something, and going back to the earlier concept from Roman law of that interdict, is that the individual, in this case, there's difficulties. They may not be able to read the contract. As ignorant as they may be, though, they're going to be smarter than the legislators, though. And just because the legislators try to make all of these funny laws, and individuals should be able to handle it. But in this case, the bankers can suffer a loss, and the individuals who knowingly take those loans or those mortgages, they're going to suffer. They're going to suffer too. The question is, how are you going to create new wealth? And that's beyond my scope a little bit right now. The world is of plenty. There's so much out there. We can find new wealth.
Jeremy, I appreciate your theoretical argument. We have about 250 years of data to consider that you might want to update your theory. In this country, the top 1% of income earners own 58% of the wealth. We have 1 million children dying from extreme poverty every month, and about $1 trillion of benefits if we were to take the usurers' fees and distribute them to the general good. Now, would you care to update your theory given some of the pertinent data?
You know, it seems like maybe the individuals, the commoners, you know, maybe they deserve it. Maybe it's just how it has to be. Or maybe they have to know how to hold their hands and say, I'm not going to work unless there's something better. But it's going to have to be some type of dialogue. But you can just hold your hands and say, I'm not going to work. You can sell your work or sell your efforts somewhere else.
Jeremy, I can agree that I'm borrowing money from the bank, and they're having a concern as to my efforts of paying it back, but I have a concern too, and I think I should charge the bank some interest or some form of security for me, because how do I know what they're going to do with the money I pay back to them? I don't know what they're going to do with it. In fact, there's a rumor they take it out of circulation. I don't know where that is. I don't know where that goes. So I think there's quite a mystery as to what happens. So therefore, I'm not so secure knowing that my payback to the bank is going to be tallied properly, handled properly, and my payments are then reduced in the course of time. So would you agree with me that I should be charging the bank some form of interest so I can be sure that they're handling that repayment of my money?
My good friend Dr. Smith had an idea about that. It's the value of, you know, it's make sure you work with silver or gold and make sure you have a proper value with it. It also may be in the contract you sign with them. You've got to, you know, you would think if they just hold on to it, they're missing money and opportunities in other places in this big world of ours. Things have gotten so small. Micro, minimization, you've got frontiers. The soil seems to be a frontier. I saw outer space over there. It seems to be a frontier. Lots of opportunities.
You heard my description of third world debt. Now, I called this an extreme form of usury. Would you prefer to use, would you grant that what I described was unjust? And do you think the word usury should apply to a situation like that?
I heard your story about this this EMH or this economic monetary hitman or something like that, and Mr. Perkins or something you mentioned about, and he's gone over and he's talked to and trying to find some representative of some third world country and tries to give them a loan or negotiate that his company is going to be better than some other company to come in and help them develop with new ideas and new technology. That seems like fairly reasonable stuff. Now, if the other people are of sound mind, or there needs to be some interdict, going back to Roman law, there might be some exceptions, and it's going beyond where I can think right now, but maybe there's some possibility to offer them some legal recourse.
Jeremy, about 100 years ago,
Yes.
there was another guy, and we were not successful in getting him to cross beyond the promoter. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
And his name was Henry George.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
now, you, in addition to your definition of usury, you gave us what's been called utilitarianism.
Yes.
Henry George made this remark about that, and I wonder if you would care to answer it or
Okay?
Okay. Now I have to find it.
That's okay. Take your time. I have lots of it. Don't get nervous.
Here we go. Even the quoting, this is from Henry Ford, even the intellectually courageous have shrunk from laying stress on principles which might threaten great vested interests, while others, yourself I think he means, have exercised their ingenuity in eliminating from the science everything which could offend those interests. A science which seems but to justify injustice, to canonize selfishness by throwing around it the halo of utility. So he seems to be attacking your idea of utilitarianism.
Right. The good professor, the theologian, talked about this problem in terms of distribution and the one side of my good friend Dr. Smith, and the other side being the distribution side, and how they need to come together to some harmony between them. The side I've taken up on usury is that, from another perspective, is many people under our present system cannot often get loans, from my experience, cannot get an opportunity to grow because they don't qualify. I'm trying to open the doors so more people can get the energy, the money, if you will, so that they can have a chance too. In that sense, I don't consider it usury. It's an opportunity, and it's trying to bring these individuals together to make a go of it in common agreement. In terms of being an apologist for those who become rich in doing these things, or entities thereof, they can then become what we might call engines for doing bigger projects, doing other things. And we can still have the relationship of individuals to individuals, which is my concern. And these other engines can work with larger groups to create larger projects and larger gains. And so there's a place for everybody in this very bountiful world we're in.
So you're not considering any of this to be injustice? Or you think this utility that you just described
If there's a contract, go ahead.
overcomes it?
Yes, I am at this point taking the side of utility and finding a place for it, yes.
Mr. Bentham, you seem to have missed what I was saying.
Oh.
You keep saying that the earth is so bountiful, and the soil seems to be plentiful and unlimited, and looking from space, Earth looked just fine, or there's a vast universe from which we can fuel our economy. Did you miss what I was saying that went the other way? And if not, what do you make of all that?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. Listen, my friend Dr. Smith, he's thought about these things. And you're right, there is scarcity. And in times of scarcity, we have to really value those things. And when we value those things, we treat them as precious and we give them higher values. And money and our competition, say, that we're looking at or trying to get it, is trying to give people opportunities to do things. And we're trying to give people opportunities to have a place. And when there's scarcity, there'll be a certain amount of competition and a certain amount of winners and losers. And in some sense, we have to live with some of that. But the economic system, this utilitarian, the place of the marketplace can sort of like work with that because you're dealing with scarce issues, and the marketplace knows about scarce issues and gives them value. And it takes time perhaps for some of those values to be recognized. Some of these fancy words you use are not so common, carbon dioxide spewing everywhere. Why, there's less carbon in the atmosphere than there was a long time ago, I was once told. And how are we gonna, things go back and forth, and we've just gotta, I'm trying to work where there's a place in the marketplace that now for individuals, but also to work with perhaps in forms of scarcity.
So, when did you start designing prisons?
When did I start designing prisons? Sometimes humans do go too far.
Yes, exactly.
And if you've had a conversation earlier about debtors' prisons, and there were certain laws made to prevent people from going to those prisons. Sometimes there's injustices, and people need to find their way in prison, and that's the way it is. Yeah, all the way in the back.
What were the theologians of your day, what was occupying their minds when you were alive?
What was on the minds of the theologians of my day? You had a wonderful gentleman that gave you a history coming up towards my day, and during that Reformation period, you had some speakers from the Calvinist tradition, maybe, and someone said Presbyterians today, I don't know where they all went, but from these Calvinists, but that there was a place for interest rates, there was a place in the various churches for interest rates, and it was just a part of the human nature of things. If you go to indigenous people, and I traveled the world a bit, people gamble everywhere. And in society, can we still not gamble? It seems reasonable. It seems like, and if we can gamble trying to do good things, that's part of life too.
Professor Bentham, you have certainly shown us why, in the world we live in, both interest and prisons are so plausible. And indeed, you've made important contributions to both. For those who don't know, Professor Bentham is the designer of the panopticon. The panopticon was designed as a prison for the poor. And it remains today the basic design of every jail and prison in the world. And so your influence has indeed been great. Let me suggest that despite the plausibility of the panopticon, or penitentiary as we now call it, that as it is one kind of prison, interest is another kind of prison, only far worse. You say indeed in your utilitarianism that greed is part of human nature. And so it is. It is certainly part of my human nature. But I would hate to think that greed exhausted my human nature, that there was no other part of human nature that your philosophy could address. Because your utilitarianism is, as you labeled it, really hedonism. The idea that there exists only pleasure and pain, and moral law is no more. The good is no more than pleasure, and the evil is no more than pain.
Yes,
And-
good words, I remember that.
Well, at your age, I would have forgotten. And so let me suggest that your greatest contribution to the world is not one prison, but three. The prison of the poor for the panopticon, the prison of the poor of interest, and the prison for those poor in spirit of hedonism.
On the light side, though. On the light side, though, I've been a strong pusher of animal rights. And I see what you people do to some of your animals. I don't know. I'm more friends with them, I think, at times.
Yes, I have sort of a compound question here. When I was a young man, I just starting out in life and had bought a new car, and the guy that owned a credit union said this was a great, saving your money and putting it in the bank. And he taught me about the rule of 72s. And that was about compound interest, the miracle of compound interest. He said, you put your money in the bank and it will double every 10 years. And so you keep doubling your money, doubling your money. So it seemed like the object was that to increase your supply of money, to multiply money, so there'd be more and more money. And I think from what you heard you saying, that it's a good thing to have more money, because if you have more money, then you have more money to loan to people, and that gives more people opportunity
Yes.
to do things. And that also increases the value of goods, like land and things like that. So what really happens is the prices of things go up, because there's more money to buy the things. So, all right, so now, as the price goes up, they call that inflation. So now it seems that what comes around is the fact that in order for me to protect myself against inflation, because other people are loaning all this money to people, and I have money, so if I don't spend it today, and I save it, and I don't put it in your bank, then I'm going to lose interest because of the inflation. So I must demand that somebody pay me interest for my money. If I'm going to loan them the money, I'm going to lose purchasing power of this money, because the more money you loan and the more compound interest, then the prices of everything go up and we have inflation.
What's the question?
Yeah, what's the question? I
Well, the
understand
question
we
I'm
have to
asking
work
the
hard
question,
as individuals.
Doesn't interest really add to inflation because it increases the money supply beyond the ability of the real economy to produce the goods and services to match the value of money?
I've been listening to you all. You have a funny way to talk about this thing like structural inflation or something that's built in and everything. And I do think you have a point with that. The secret seems to be is finding new wealth. And you've got to go out there and find new wealth. We won't talk about another Earth or two.
So I can go out find new wealth so I can pay the interest?
Yes, yeah, the problem that I'm familiar with, and this has a long history too. If you look at the Old Testament and in Deuteronomy and Jeremiah and Leviticus and Genesis, you have the built-up of some protections against usury. They weren't pushing for the interest, but then there was some accumulation of wealth, and people wanted this wealth, and they wanted to be able to make loans. And there was this wonderful Rabbi Hillel in about 70 AD says, you know what, if you want to get by, with the people who have this extra wealth or this more money that's been finally accumulated, is you negotiate and you try to find ways to get that wealth too. And it seems what you're suggesting is we live in a very competitive system. And I can see there might need to be some balancing needed to be, between distribution and what I'm going to call utilitarian usefulness. We do want to keep people busy, and they should be doing good things. And if there's not, there's consequences.
Yes, don't we all just need to be more efficient? Isn't that the answer to all our problems?
Yes, being thrifty and being efficient are very good things.
Professor, you seem to put your trust in the market. When the market collapses like it is now, what do you put your trust in?
That's a good question.
The foundations of the market are strong.
The fundamentals.
They may collapse, and there might be a rebirthing. Just treat the animals nicely, though. Yeah.
Is what you're discussing your perception, a description of an economic world, whether it be true or not? The real issue comes down to whether it's moral or not. Is this ultimately a moral issue that we're considering here this afternoon?
I think you're onto something. I'm not sure about morals, though, too much.
Well, obviously, since you asked the London Council to replace, you wanted to have your shrubs replaced with cadavers instead of flowers, because you found that cadavers were more aesthetically pleasing than flowers.
I have some odd tastes once in a while. It's a strong sense of individualism in me, though. Thank you very much.